4:47 a.m. Marlborough, Massachusetts. A residential cul-de-sac off Farm Road, 9 miles west of Worcester. Maple trees. Frost on the grass. A 2-story colonial with white shutters and a mailbox that had been emptied every day, without fail, for 4 months. 23 federal agents moved through the pre-dawn cold in a tight stack, breath visible, weapons up. The temperature that morning was 29 degrees. The agents wore tactical gear over thermal layers. No one spoke above a whisper. Hand signals only passed the first property line. The stack paused at the front door. 3 seconds. A hydraulic ram engaged. The door came off its hinges on the first strike. What they found inside would shut down one of the most quietly operated recruitment operations in Massachusetts federal history. 20 young women. A false wall. A sealed corridor. And a case that had started not with a tip, not with a wiretap, but with a footnote nobody was supposed to read closely. 132 days earlier, the oldest of those women had been reported missing from a town in central Massachusetts. Her name in this reconstruction is Rachel Voss, 26 years old, a registered nurse at a Worcester area clinic. She had texted her mother on a Tuesday evening in late October 2025. Home by 9, she never arrived. Rachel Voss had worked the evening shift at the clinic 3 days a week. She drove a gray Honda Civic, 7 years old, with a cracked rear passenger window she had been meaning to replace since February. She was saving for it. She was also saving for a certification course in emergency nursing she had enrolled in for the following spring. Her coworkers described her as methodical, reliable, and quick, with a dark joke when the shift ran long. She had no history of disappearing. She had no reason to disappear. The Worcester County Sheriff's Office took her missing persons report at 11:22 p.m. on a Tuesday. By the following Friday, the case had received one follow-up call and been assigned a case number. By the following month, it had been reclassified as a voluntary adult departure, based on the absence of physical evidence of foul play and an uncorroborated report that Rachel had once mentioned to a coworker that she was considering relocating. She had not relocated. She had been taken from a parking lot 2 blocks from the clinic on a Tuesday between 9:14 and 9:22 p.m. by a method that did not leave visible evidence to investigators who were not looking. No one yet connected her disappearance to the quiet colonial on Farm Road. No one connected it to other missing persons reports trickling in from across New England, Concord, Providence, Portland, Springfield. Young women, ages 22 to 27, gone without explanation from ordinary American lives. 4 of them had made it onto state missing persons boards. The rest had been filed as runaways, domestic situations, or voluntary departures. Case notes open. No momentum. What broke the case open was not a field agent, not a wiretap, not an informant. It was a paralegal named Dana Ferreira. The court transcripts in this case run more than 400 pages. But a single footnote on page 212 tells the real story. October 28, 2025. Worcester, Massachusetts. United States Attorney's Office, District of Massachusetts. Dana Ferreira, 29, had been a paralegal in the federal prosecution unit for 3 years. She was not assigned to this case. She was proofing the sealed indictment package for an unrelated Millbury defendant, a man named in this reconstruction as Carl Renner, charged in connection with a broader human trafficking network that Massachusetts State Police and Homeland Security investigations had been building since the previous spring. The indictment was 47 pages. Standard language. Renner's alleged conduct, charging counts, supporting affidavits. Ferreira's job was to verify that every address, every exhibit citation, and every cross-reference in the package was internally consistent before it went to the judge for sealing. She was on page 31 when she flagged the first inconsistency. Footnote 17 referenced a utility billing address, a commercial gas account under a shell entity called Harbor View Property Solutions, at a location on Garrison Commons Drive in Marlborough. The footnote cited the address as corroborating the defendant's operational footprint. But cross-referencing the charged properties listed in Count 3 and Count 4 of the indictment, Garrison Commons Drive appeared nowhere. Not in the charging language. Not in the supporting affidavit. Not in the search warrant appendix. Every other address in the package had a corresponding warrant or charging count. This one did not. It was 11:47 p.m. Ferreira could have flagged it in the morning. She sent the email at 11:49. The case agent for the Renner indictment was Special Agent Marcus Webb of Homeland Security Investigations, Boston Field Office. He received the email at 11:53 p.m. He read it at 12:04 a.m. 14 minutes after Ferreira's note landed in his inbox, Webb was on the phone with his supervisor. By 12:30 a.m., he had pulled the utility account for Harbor View Property Solutions. The account had been active since July 2025. Average monthly gas consumption, 1,700 cubic feet. For a single-family residential property on a cul-de-sac in a Massachusetts suburb, in the summer months, that number was high. Standard residential use ran between 500 and 1,100 cubic feet per month in summer. 1,700 stood out, but not dramatically. Then Webb pulled the electrical account for the same address. Average monthly draw, 4,200 kilowatt hours. A typical two-story colonial in Massachusetts averages between 500 and 900 kilowatt hours per month. This house was drawing nearly 5 times the residential average. In a neighborhood where no one had filed a complaint, no one had reported unusual activity, and the lawn was cut every Thursday. The gap between what this house appeared to be and what it was consuming was the first thread. Webb did not call the field team. Not yet. He ran the property. Harbor View Property Solutions had registered as an LLC in Delaware in March 2025. One listed agent. The agent's address traced to a postal drop in Providence, Rhode Island. The LLC had leased the Garrison Commons Drive property in April 2025 through a commercial property management company based in Framingham. Lease term, 14 months. Rent paid 6 months in advance. Cash equivalent, wire transfer from a secondary LLC, Eastland Housing Partners, registered in Wyoming. 2 shell entities. 1 house. Utilities consuming at institutional volume. No business filings. No commercial permits. No registered tenants. Webb called the Massachusetts State Police liaison on the Renner case at 2:15 a.m. He was asked one question: how confident are you in the anomaly? Webb pulled one more database before answering. License plate reader logs. Massachusetts maintains an automated LPR network on major arterials. Webb queried vehicles associated with the Garrison Commons Drive address. Specifically, vehicles observed departing or arriving between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. over a 90-day window. 44 distinct plate reads. 31 unique vehicles. Of those, 9 appeared more than twice in the overnight window. 1 plate, a rental sedan, Dodge Charger, Massachusetts registration, appeared 14 times over 63 days. Always arriving between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Always departing before 5 a.m. The rental agreement for that vehicle traced to a man named, in this reconstruction, as Devin Price. 41 years old. Worcester County address. No prior federal charges. 1 dismissed state charge from 2022. Solicitation. The rental had been active since early September 2025, under a corporate account registered to Eastland Housing Partners. The same Wyoming shell that had paid the lease on Garrison Commons Drive. Webb answered the state police liaison's question at 3:02 a.m. Very confident. By 6 a.m. on October 29th, a joint surveillance package had been assembled by HSI Boston, FBI Boston's Public Corruption and Civil Rights Squad, and the Massachusetts State Police Violent Fugitive Apprehension Section. The package focused on one location, the Colonial on Garrison Commons Drive, Marlborough. The operation did not move immediately. That is something worth understanding about how these investigations work. Rushing a breach on incomplete intelligence does not free victims. It alerts networks. It moves people. It destroys evidence and hands defense attorneys procedural grounds for dismissal. The agents who wanted to move fast that morning were told to wait. Not because the system was slow, because doing it wrong would have been worse than not doing it at all. The surveillance team established a static observation post on the morning of October 29th. A commercial van, utility company markings, parked on a parallel street with line of sight to the rear of the property. 2 agents. 12-hour rotations. The van was stocked for extended deployment. Water, food, battery-powered heat, a fiber optic cable running a low-profile camera mounted at bumper level with night vision capability. The agents worked in silence. They did not use their phones for anything unrelated to the operation. Every observed vehicle, every light pattern, every movement at any window was logged with a timestamp and description precise enough to hold up in an affidavit. What they documented over the following 11 days reshaped the entire investigation. The house appeared ordinary from the front. 2 cars in the driveway, both registered to the Harborview LLC. Lawn service arrived every Thursday, a legitimate local company with no apparent connection to the operation, later cleared. Mail collected each morning, typically by a man who matched Devin Price's description. Lights in the front rooms followed normal patterns. Living room. Kitchen. A bedroom on the 2nd floor. The rear of the house told a different story. The surveillance team documented that the rear-facing windows, those belonging to what the property's original floor plan identified as a 4-room back wing, showed no light variation at all. Same pattern, every night. Identical illumination levels at 9 p.m., at midnight, at 3 a.m. The windows appeared to have interior coverings, but the light bleed was consistent with interior lighting that was on continuously. Rooms that are lived in normally go dark at night. These did not. The team also documented 3 instances of what they logged as cargo transport events. A plain cargo van, dark blue, arriving between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., remaining for between 20 and 40 minutes, and departing. No outward cargo observed. Inward cargo not visible from the observation post angle. The dark blue van's plate was photographed on each of the 3 occasions. All 3 reads traced to the same vehicle, a cargo van registered under Harborview Property Solutions, the same Delaware LLC tied to the house. The van had no commercial permit. No delivery manifest on file with any municipal or state authority. It had been purchased for cash at a used vehicle lot in Attleboro in June 2025, 8 weeks after the Garrison Commons Drive lease was signed. On November 6th, the surveillance team logged the arrival of the rental Dodge Charger, Devin Price's vehicle, at 1:17 a.m. It departed at 4:49 a.m. The pattern was consistent. The house was not a residence. It was an operational hub. The back wing was sealed from the front, and someone was maintaining it at institutional scale. The mechanism that kept this house invisible for 4 months was not sophisticated. It was routine. A cut lawn. Collected mail. Shell companies registered in states with permissive LLC laws. The operation persisted not because it was technically complex, but because it looked exactly like everything around it. On November 9th, the surveillance team captured a partial view through the rear fence line. A ground floor window, rear-facing, had its covering disturbed for approximately 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, the camera captured a figure consistent with a young adult female, standing, facing inward. That image, combined with the accumulated surveillance intelligence and the utility anomaly, was sufficient for the affidavit. Webb filed for a federal search warrant on November 10th. The warrant application was 53 pages. United States District Court, District of Massachusetts. The presiding judge granted it the same afternoon. The sealed indictment against Carl Renner in the original Milbury case had been executed by that point. Renner was in federal custody, but the Garrison Commons Drive location had been invisible to the original investigation entirely. It was not connected to Renner's charged conduct. The link was circumstantial, the same shell entity network, the same operational methodology. A different node. A node that Renner had apparently not disclosed to investigators and that the indictment had inadvertently captured in a single footnote. Devin Price had not been charged. He had not been under surveillance before Ferreira's email. He had been invisible. What's most surprising about this case is that Price had been operating 1 block outside the geographic perimeter of the original investigation for 4 months. The task force had been looking at a map with a circle on it. Garrison Commons Drive was just outside that circle. The warrant was sealed. The Joint Operations Command was established on November 12th at FBI Boston headquarters. Agencies on the operation order: HSI Boston, FBI Boston Violent Crimes Against Children and Human Trafficking Task Force, Massachusetts State Police, Marlborough Police Department, in a supporting role with a perimeter assignment. Command briefing. 1 principal structure. 1 primary entry point, front door. 1 secondary, rear French doors off the kitchen. Structural concern: the floor plan suggested the back wing had been modified. Pre-breach intelligence indicated a possible interior partition, nature unknown. Entry teams were briefed to expect the unexpected and to move through the structure methodically. Each agent had a printed copy of the original property floor plan, annotated with the surveillance team's observed light patterns and the estimated location of the rear partition. The breach team lead had walked a similar floor plan in a training facility in Quantico 18 months earlier. He noted the similarities in a pre-operation briefing note. The annotation read, "Expect interior modification, expect locked interior doors, expect occupied rooms." 23 agents. 3 teams. Breach team on the front. Secondary team on the rear. 3rd team staged at the perimeter. Tactical entry planned for 4:30 a.m. Lowest human activity window. Maximum surprise. Minimum civilian presence on the street. The night before the operation, Webb sat in the operations room and looked at the photograph from the surveillance camera. 4 seconds of video. A partial figure. A young woman standing in a window she probably did not know anyone could see. He did not know her name. He did not know how long she had been in that room. He did not know how many were with her. He knew the warrant. He knew the breach plan. He knew that if the intelligence was wrong, he would have to account for 23 agents deployed against an empty house. He did not think the intelligence was wrong. Put yourself in Webb's position for a moment, sitting with that image at 2 in the morning, knowing you have 7 hours until you either confirm everything or explain why you were wrong about all of it. At 4:31 a.m. on November 13, 2025, the breach team made entry. The front door came off its hinges on the first strike. Webb's team moved through the front rooms in under 40 seconds. Living room clear. Kitchen clear. The Harborview LLC documentation confirmed Devin Price was listed as property manager for the Eastland Housing Partners account. He was not in the house. The front staircase. 2nd floor. 2 bedrooms, both locked. Entry made. Both empty. Beds made. Personal items suggesting occupancy. Clothing, toiletries, but no occupants present. The occupants of the front rooms had apparently been moved or departed. That was the first obstacle. The front of the house was empty. Webb called a halt. 30 seconds of controlled stillness inside the structure. He had expected resistance or concealment. He had not expected absence. Then the secondary team, moving through the rear of the kitchen, found the pantry wall. Standard residential pantry. Shelving, canned goods, the expected visual vocabulary of a kitchen storage closet. But the rear wall did not meet the floor, a gap of approximately 1.5 inches, running the full width. Hinges, concealed behind a shelf bracket. A latch mechanism, operated from the pantry side. The secondary team lead pressed the bracket. The wall swung inward. Behind it, a short corridor, approximately 15 feet long, with 3 doors on each side. At the far end, a 7th door. All 7 doors were locked from the exterior, padlock and hasp, each one. The corridor was lit by a strip of fluorescent fixtures mounted at ceiling height on a continuous circuit, the same lights the surveillance team had observed burning without variation for 11 days. The air in the corridor was warm and stale. A secondary evac unit, visible through a ceiling grill at the far end, was running. The floor was institutional linoleum over concrete, not original to the house's construction. Someone had poured a concrete subfloor over the original hardwood in the rear wing. That work required tools, time, and workers who had seen the inside of the house and had not reported what they were building. The breach team moved in. 6 seconds per door. Entry made on all 7 simultaneously. Inside the 6 side rooms, 20 young women, not all in the same condition. Some standing, some seated on cots. All responsive, all adults, the youngest, as later confirmed, 22 years old. The oldest, 27. Rachel Voss was in the 4th room. She had been held for 132 days. The 7th door at the end of the corridor opened to a utility space, electrical panels, a secondary heating unit, the infrastructure that explained the anomalous power draw. Running continuous climate control and lighting across a sealed 7-room corridor required exactly the draw Webb had flagged from the utility records. The evidence was the building itself. The subsequent triage was documented by responding Marlborough EMS, with mutual aid from Worcester County. 20 young women transported. All received immediate medical evaluation. The attending physician's note entered into the federal case file described, in clinical terms, conditions consistent with prolonged confinement. The documentation is part of the sealed medical exhibit in the indictment. What the report does document, now part of the public record of the indictment, is that several of the women had not been outside the structure since the date of their initial transport to it. The concrete subfloor, the sealed corridor, the continuously burning lights that made it impossible to track the passage of time by the natural movement of daylight. These were not incidental features of the operation. They were design choices. Someone had thought carefully about how to disorient the people inside. 4 of the 20 women had active listings on Massachusetts and Rhode Island state missing persons boards. The remaining 16 had been listed in various ways: runaway, voluntary departure, domestic situation, in records from Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Vermont. All 20 were United States citizens or lawful permanent residents. All had been reported missing between July and November 2025. The oldest had been there since June 25th. In the days following the breach, investigators began the process of reconstructing how each of the 20 women had entered the Garrison Commons Drive property. That reconstruction is part of the sealed investigative record. What is available in the public portions of the indictment describes a recruitment methodology that did not rely on physical coercion at the point of initial contact. The network used a layered approach: initial contact through employment offers, typically in healthcare, hospitality, or domestic services, advertised through platforms that aggregate freelance and contract job listings. The offers were credible. They used the names of real companies, or names close enough to real companies to pass a casual search. A follow-up interview, conducted by phone or video, preceded a scheduled in-person orientation meeting. Women who arrived for that orientation meeting did not leave. The network had been running this methodology since at least March 2025, based on the financial records associated with the Harborview and Eastland entities. The Delaware LLC was incorporated in March. The first utility account was opened in April. The first victim transport, based on the surveillance log and the statements later provided to investigators, occurred in late June. Devin Price was not in the house when it was breached. He had not been there since the rental sedan was last logged on the LPR network, 4 days earlier. His phone was active, but geofence data placed him in the Worcester metro area. An FBI surveillance unit had been placed on Price's known associates and his routine locations as part of the pre-breach operational plan. At 7:14 a.m. on November 13th, 2 hours and 43 minutes after the breach, Price walked into a coffee shop on Chandler Street in Worcester, ordered a medium coffee, and sat at a corner table facing the door. 2 plainclothes agents were already at the adjacent table. They identified themselves at 7:17 a.m. Price did not run. He did not speak. He placed his coffee cup on the table and looked at the window. He was transported to the Worcester FBI field office. He was advised of his rights. He declined to answer questions. What happened in the interview room over the following 4 hours is part of the sealed investigative record. What is publicly documented is that Price was presented with a portion of the financial record, specifically the wire transfer chain connecting the Eastland Housing Partners Wyoming account to the Harborview Delaware LLC to the lease agreement and utility accounts for Garrison Commons Drive. He was also shown a photograph of the corridor and the 7 locked doors. He was shown the surveillance camera image from November 9th, 4 seconds, a partial figure at a rear window. He looked at the photograph for a long time. His attorney, who had arrived by 9 a.m., advised him to say nothing. He said nothing. He was processed, charged on the initial criminal complaint that had been prepared as part of the breach package, and remanded without bail at his initial appearance that afternoon. The federal magistrate described the flight risk and danger to the community findings as straightforward. The subsequent investigation by the Joint Task Force produced a federal indictment against Devin Price in the District of Massachusetts, a superseding document that incorporated the original Renner indictment as a related instrument and named Garrison Commons Drive as the operational hub of a recruitment and detention network that had been processing victims since at least April 2025. The indictment, as unsealed, described Price's role as operational coordinator for a network with connections extending into Rhode Island and Connecticut. The Harborview Property Solutions entity was traced to 3 additional properties, 2 in Worcester County, 1 in Providence, that had been vacated prior to the Marlborough breach. Whether those properties had previously housed victims, and for how long, remains a question the investigation has not fully answered. Carl Renner, in custody since the original Millbury indictment, faced a superseding charging document that now named his relationship to the Harborview network. His attorney filed a motion challenging the scope of the superseding instrument. That motion is pending. Renner had been arrested on the original Millbury indictment at his home address, a rented duplex in the Millbury Town Center, at 6:40 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October. Agents described the arrest as uneventful. He had been cooperative at the door, a detail his defense attorney later cited in bail proceedings as evidence of good character. The bail motion was denied. What the defense motion did not address, because it could not at that point in the proceeding, was what the agents found in the duplex's second bedroom. A laptop. 3 prepaid phones. A printed spreadsheet, handwritten annotations in the margins that listed what appeared to be initials and dates over a 7-month period. That spreadsheet is now Exhibit 47 in the superseding indictment. The annotations, as decoded by the financial crimes analysis, correspond to dates and amounts in the Eastland Housing Partners wire transfer record. Renner's role, as described in the superseding instrument, was financial intermediary. He processed upstream payments into the shell account structure and took a percentage, documented in the spreadsheet margin, in a handwriting analysis confirmed as his own. The Wyoming LLC, Eastland Housing Partners, had received wire transfers from 7 distinct upstream financial accounts across 4 states. Federal prosecutors have traced 3 of those accounts to identified individuals. The remaining 4 traced to nominee accounts and overseas transfers that the FBI Financial Crimes Unit has flagged but not yet fully resolved. Whether Devin Price was the top of this network, or a coordinator within a larger one, is a question the indictment does not answer. The charging language describes him as an operational facilitator. It names co-conspirators known and unknown. The known co-conspirators, at time of filing, numbered 2. Both are identified in the sealed portions of the indictment. One has been charged. One has not. If you have followed other federal trafficking cases out of the Massachusetts district over the past 2 years, a certain pattern in the network structure will look familiar. The 2-tier shell company model, a Delaware LLC fronting a Wyoming account, appeared in a separate Worcester County case in 2024. That case is closed. Whether the networks were connected has not been established publicly. The FBI has not confirmed or denied a link. Here's a detail that stayed with me going through the case documents. The lawn service. A local company. Legitimate operation. Showed up every Thursday. Cut the grass. Collected their payment through an automated account associated with the Harborview LLC. They had been doing it since May 2025. Nobody asked them anything unusual. They had no reason to know. The cul-de-sac looked like a cul-de-sac. That is the most efficient form of concealment there is. Not technical. Not sophisticated. Just ordinary. The evidence processing team that worked Garrison Commons Drive after the breach spent 6 days on the property. They logged over 1,400 individual items. Phones, 8 of them, all prepaid, all wiped but subject to forensic extraction. Paper documents, including a second handwritten ledger found behind a ceiling panel in the utility room. Electronic storage devices. Clothing. Food packaging with date codes that helped establish a timeline of occupancy. The concrete subfloor in the rear wing was core sampled to confirm the date of pour, a forensic method used when investigators need to establish when a structural modification was made. The core sample analysis put the pour at between 60 and 90 days before the breach. That corresponds to August or September 2025, which aligns with the ramp-up period the financial records suggest, and with the date Devin Price's rental sedan first appeared in the LPR logs. The ledger found in the utility room ceiling is now Exhibit 83 in the superseding indictment. It is described in the charging document as a transport and scheduling log. The entries are coded: initials, numbers, location abbreviations. The financial crimes analysis has decoded a portion of it. The decoded entries describe what prosecutors characterize as a multi-site movement schedule, indicating that Garrison Commons Drive was one of at least 3 active locations in the network during the period covered by the ledger. The other 2 location abbreviations have not been publicly identified. One matches a zip code in Providence. One does not match any location the task force has been able to confirm. That entry remains open. Team Webb's operation closed the Garrison Commons Drive node. The network that fed it, the recruitment pipeline, the upstream financial structure, the co-conspirators known and unknown, is still an open case. The FBI has described the investigation as continuing. No further arrests have been publicly announced. The demand that makes a network like this function has not changed. The Scottsdale entity is still registered. Nobody has been charged in connection with it. The case file for the original Millbury defendant, Carl Renner, the man whose indictment contained Footnote 17, now runs to over 600 pages. The footnote that broke it open is 4 lines long. It references a utility address. It was supposed to be a supporting detail. Devin Price remains in federal custody pending trial. No bail application has been granted. His attorney has entered a not guilty plea. Carl Renner has entered into plea negotiations under the superseding instrument. No agreement has been publicly disclosed. The 20 young women recovered from Garrison Commons Drive have been connected with federal victim services. The nature of their medical and psychological care is protected under federal victim privacy statutes. Their names have not been released. 4 of them had families who had been actively searching for them for more than 3 months. The other 16 had families too. Rachel Voss, the young nurse from the Worcester Clinic, as we have reconstructed her here, was reported missing on a Tuesday in October 2025 after texting her mother that she would be home by 9. 132 days later, she walked out of a sealed corridor in a colonial house on a Marlborough cul-de-sac, under a blanket, to a waiting ambulance. Her mother had not stopped calling the state missing persons line. Every week. The same question. The same answer. No new information at this time. She had also, in the 2nd month after Rachel's disappearance, begun driving the route between the clinic and Rachel's apartment. Slowly, multiple times. Looking at parking lots, at side streets, at the gaps between streetlights where a parking lot camera's field of view ran out. She was not a trained investigator. She was doing what a mother does when the system that is supposed to look has filed the case and moved on. She did not find anything. There was nothing to find on that route. But she drove it anyway, because the alternative was accepting an answer she did not believe. The 3 shell companies, Harborview Property Solutions, Eastland Housing Partners, and the unnamed Scottsdale entity, remain under federal financial investigation. 2 have been legally dissolved by court order. The 3rd has not. The Wyoming LLC was funded through upstream accounts that investigators have partially traced. The remaining 4 unresolved financial accounts represent an estimated network of transactions that the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit describes as ongoing and complex. No figure has been attached to that characterization publicly. The protocol gap this case exposed has since been the subject of an internal review within the Massachusetts State Police and the Worcester County Sheriff's Office. The gap involves the threshold for escalating an adult missing persons report to a multi-agency board. Under the protocol in place in 2025, escalation required either physical evidence of a crime, a credible third-party witness account, or a formal request from a ranking investigator. A nurse who texted her mother and vanished from a parking lot, with no physical evidence recovered, and no witness who came forward, did not meet the threshold. A college student reported missing from a Springfield apartment, whose roommate said she had been talking about leaving, did not meet the threshold. The threshold was not designed to exclude these cases. It was designed to manage volume. In 2025, Massachusetts state agencies received over 4,000 adult missing persons reports. The escalation protocol existed to ensure that resources went to the cases with the clearest indicators of immediate danger. A well-designed recruitment operation generates no immediate indicators of danger at the point of disappearance. That is the design. The absence of evidence is the product, not the absence of a crime. The Price indictment was unsealed on the morning of November 14th. By noon, federal public defenders had been assigned. By 3 p.m., media reports were describing a Marlborough trafficking bust without naming the defendant or the victims. The coverage was accurate in outline and sparse in detail, which is standard for cases where victims' identities are protected and prosecution is active. Dana Ferreira, the paralegal whose 11:49 p.m. email started the operational chain, is not named in the indictment. She is not a witness in the case. Her role will not appear in any press release. In the federal prosecution system, a paralegal who catches a discrepancy in a footnote is performing a clerical function. The law does not have a category for what she actually did. Webb, in a debrief document that is part of the internal HSI after-action report, described Ferreira's email as the operational trigger. That language is bureaucratic. What it means is that without the footnote, without the email, without someone working past 11 p.m. on a sealed document she was not assigned to, the Garrison Commons Drive address would have remained invisible to the investigation. The Renner case would have closed. The utility anomaly would have remained in a database no one queried. The debrief report is 112 pages. The section on the footnote is 2 paragraphs. Webb's observation goes further. In a section addressing investigative methodology, he writes that the Garrison Commons Drive node was functionally undetectable within the existing investigative framework because it had been designed to fit within the perimeter of routine. His word, routine. The operation had not attempted to evade surveillance by going dark. It had evaded surveillance by going ordinary. The lawn, the mail, the lights in the front rooms. These were not accidents of a careless operation. They were deliberate investments in the appearance of nothing